Good evening, everybody. I'm Paul Harding, and I have the honor and pleasure of welcoming you to our Stony Brook MFA in Creative Writing and Literature Writers Speak Wednesday faculty reading. It's easy for me. Although we're gathered virtually tonight, we are not at all gathered remotely. We have a characteristically incredible lineup of authors, all of whom teach at our program, all of whom write with soul and in the spirits of truth and beauty, and all of whose creativity stands in inspiring and encouraging contradiction to the destructions lately wrought by pandemic and war. We won't have any questions tonight, no answers, no questions, no Q&A or conversation. It's just purely about the work and about all of us having the happy privilege of reading all to you. So I drew the short straw, so I'll begin. And in the spirit of contradicting war and hatred and all that, I usually write about death. So this is just a little hopefully nice piece of a couple of pages from a novel I'm publishing next January. It's about a couple of young people who are on a farm during haying season, and the young girl named Bridget is Irish. She's from Ireland, and she's a servant at this big estate. And the boy Ethan is at the estate for the summer painting. He's painting the mowing. Ethan finished the portrait of Bridget he'd been painting. She sitting for him, half an hour here, 20 minutes there. Bridget rose to look at the painting, which Ethan had insisted she not see until it was finished. But he said, "Wait, let me have your hand." Bridget gave him her hand, palm up, pink and bright, calloused, cupped in his broad, dark, paint-smeared, upturned hand. His hands felt soft and rough at the same time. Soft skin, but like iron bolts and nuts fitted together underneath. "Don't be scared," he said. "I'm not scared." The smells of his paints and the spirits on his hands, and in the rough cloth of his clothes and the sweat on his skin, swirled in her nose and behind her eyes and through the tight space inside her head between her brain and skull, but she was not afraid. He pulled his slip joint knife from his back pocket and it jumped open in his hand. He took the tip of her middle finger between his thumb and forefinger and squeezed it. It firmed at the pressure and turned livid. Ethan touched the tip of the blade to her finger and a drop of blood beaded from it. She barely felt the nick. "Nothing else is that kind of red," she said. "I've seen flowers that red," he said, "strawberries, cherries, but everything in the world changes colors every second." He held his palette beneath her hand and guided her finger over a smudge of red paint. He squeezed her finger and the blood trembled and swelled and dropped onto the paint. He drew a drop of blood from his own finger and added it to hers. "Here," he gave her his handkerchief and mixed the blood into the paint with a small brush. "Look." She rose, stiff from sitting on a bale of hay for so long, and stepped toward the canvas. She expected looking at the portrait would be like looking into the mirror, but she came around the easel and saw the painted girl, and it was like a mallet striking her heart, and like her heart was a bronze gong somehow inside her ribs, and its sounding somehow unstrung and remade her. She did not see herself. She saw how she was seen. The painted girl's face seemed stark, stripped, Her skin pink here, white there, befreckled here, porcelain there, pebbly. Her pale forehead in the shadow beneath the hat she wore, her coral nose flushed by the sun. Bridget saw the girl's skull, her bones beneath her skin and muscles. The girl looked straight at her, looked her straight in the eye, but smiled too, and bowed her head a little, like she was sturdy and shy at once. The girl was placed in the left part of the canvas. Behind her on the right were the fields and haycocks and the high horizon full of light and clouds, a veil of rain sweeping past, and nearer, thick, matted, bright and shadowed grass and long looped thorn vines and Queen Anne's lace and delicate fanning ferns, and almost without substance, dim at the edge of the coarse, heavy grass directly behind the girl, a strawberry plant with a mass of shadowed green fruit. Bridget wiped tears from her eyes and gasped a little laugh. To think how closely, with how much care, how much courtesy and gentleness he had looked at her. Watch, Ethan said. He touched a bright pinhead of their mixed blood and paint to one of the faint green strawberries, and the entire dark, massed lower part of the painting suddenly seemed to deepen and reach farther back into the plane of the canvas, deeper into the imaginary shadows of the painted meadow, and the painted girl almost to come nearer, as if she had leaned almost imperceptibly, tentatively forward. Wherever the painting ends up, wherever in the world, on whatever wall, or in whatever, he laughed, whatever museum, part of you will be there in that berry in the grass and the flowers. And no one will ever know, Bridget said. She imagined a man and a woman dressed in fine, dark clothes, standing side by side in front of the painting, looking at it on a wall in a small gallery with a windowed front in a city where it had just rained, and the light coming through the windows was silver and gray and bright and uniform, and the man and woman had brought some of the cold wetness of the rain inside the gallery. No one but us, Ethan said, unless you tell somebody someday, like your kids. Thank you kindly. And now we have Molly Gaudry.
Thanks, Paul. Always good to hear what you're working on. So I'm gonna be honest. I am not much in the mood to hear my own work tonight. But I am here because my dad is here, and he's never missed one of these. So I just want to say hi, Dad. I love you. Um, we, uh, we've had a hard month, and I think that something that I've been thinking about is that it's times like this that we can turn to literature and this thing that we do and find comfort in the words of others. So tonight I'm going to read two poems. This first one is called Good Mother by Rachel Eliza Griffiths. Praise the woman who took me in her arms and wouldn't let go of me. We sank to the floor in the middle of the aisle in Rite Aid. It was a late morning and I walked slowly, furious that spring could still be so wonderful. Magnolia tempted me to forget about my mother for a few minutes. I stared at a Brooklyn blue sky through branches clasping pear blossoms. The limbs shook in sunlight. My eyes adjusted when I went into the pharmacy and realized everywhere I looked, the world announced it would soon be Mother's Day. Something ripped itself out of me, a howl so wide I thought I would burst. The woman near the counter understood right away. The way my mother once understood, I had been born in a specific sadness. The woman did not say she was a mother, but I knew it. She put her arms around me and waved away the cashiers and the security guard who repeated, "Ma'am, ma'am." A stranger rocked me in her arms. So much kindness as we fell over and crashed against a row of votive candles. She didn't say it would be okay. She didn't ask me what was wrong, but her arms put me in a vicious prayer. I almost bit her, almost pushed her away. We held on. We held on and praised the nameless thing that makes us what we think we aren't strong enough to know. She knew. She didn't let go of me. Praise the woman who didn't wipe my snot from her shirt, my tears from her collarbone, who did not tell me to pull myself together while everything inside me dropped. Crushed bones, blossoms pushing through my mouth. A word, mom, mom, mom. This broken bird song of mine with no bird, no wing, no way to fly back through time. Praise the woman who did not leave me. Praise the woman who smelled like fabric softener and coffee and the good things I must believe I am too. Praise the mothers who walk slowly through this world, bringing children into themselves, burying children sometimes before themselves, and who defend something harder than innocence. Praise the guts and grace of mothers. Praise their exhaustion and their good work. Praise their wit, their wonderful ways of listening to the world fall asleep against its clean pillow. For the woman who knelt with me in an ugly heap in the middle of Rite Aid on an unbearable spring day, who helped me buy a Mother's Day card for my dead mother, who knew better than to say I'd be just fine. For you, I lift my arms each spring and wish you a kindness so fantastic I sometimes feel I'm in midair, the shadow of my wings clapping in joy above your children who must love you. The second one you might be a little more familiar with. It's by Dylan Thomas. It's Do Not Go Gentle into That Good Night. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day, rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay, rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight and learn, too late they grieved it on its way. Do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay, rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Thank you. And up next is Matt Klam.
Thanks, Molly. I'd rather we just all just end now because Molly's reading was so good. But I'm glad to follow her so I can tell her how beautiful that was. And also to say, I wish I had thought of reading somebody else's thing. I'm in the middle of finishing up two pieces right now, which is very strange for me. But one is a feature for the New York Times Magazine, which I might have thought to read a few pages to all of you. It's a celebrity profile, except I got the changes back from my editor about 2 hours ago, and it shows all the little grammatical problems that I'd never thought of that I can't wrap my mind around. Which and that, for instance, I just can't figure it out. Anyway, and then I also recently sold a long short story to the New Yorker that is about this time and death and cookies. But I can't figure out right now what to pull out of that. So I'm going to read something that was there was an assignment given to me in 2020. It was it was probably like in April of 2020. So it was the beginning of the pandemic, and they were just trying to sort of connect us all. And the assignment was just 2 words, close encounters and a word count. So this is what I wrote for that assignment. It's called Let's Get Small. 1978, 8th grade. I'm 5'9", 103 pounds, and I'm often mistaken for a girl. Dave, a kid in my homeroom, same height, blonde like me, is somehow fat and skinny at the same time. We both know Let's Get Small, the Steve Martin album. We're basically into the intellectual scene. And although we use it to transfix girls and keep cretins off balance, there's something else going on. In a romantic coupling, you turn inward, but friendships put you shoulder to shoulder to take on the world. Ninth grade, we drink vodka at Martha Cedar Homes and throw up in the street. I sleep over at Dave's house, and it's comfortable. Our mothers like the same kind of pottery. My father, who's sometimes fun, is prone to rages and tantrums like a child, while Dave's father, also fun, is a child psychiatrist. His parents casually slip into French at breakfast. His three older sisters have been known to sit on him and put his hair in doll curlers, but they've also taught him how to have a conversation. 10th grade, we're in high school now, still no girlfriends. So for prom, we rent a limo with 4 other boys dressed by our fathers in blazers and loafers. We're not cool, and it's almost beside the point that 2 of the guys in the limo are on acid, and one of them is a dwarf. For someone who feels anxious in a group, it's good to belong anywhere with anyone, even Dave, even me. 11th grade, we have busboy jobs at Le Chateau, a big, corny restaurant run by a mean French family in a stone mansion overlooking the Hudson Valley. The maitre d' is not so sure about us. Neither are the waiters, the captains, the wine guys, or Joseph, who hired us, or his lieutenant, Coos. Individually, we do a capable job of clearing, hauling trays and dish tubs, but as a team, we're incompetent and despised. The grandmother catches us eating food off people's plates. We're blamed for breaking the ice machine, and the staff generates a growing list of insulting nicknames for us. But there's a wonderful smell of baguettes in paper bags, and on the drive home, we own the road, dissecting the strangeness of a menacing world. 12th grade, Mr. Enriquez's humor class, I memorized Steve Martin's The Gospel Maniacs, a bit about a corrupt TV minister, and perform it because religion is horseshit and comedy is a protest against small-mindedness. It doesn't go over with my classmates, and Dave is the only one laughing for the entire 4.5 minutes. College. Even though ours is a bond based on achieving nothing, Dave gets into a very good college. I enroll at an underfunded state school because it's the place that let me in. This isn't the first time that one of us breaks stride and inadvertently wounds the other, and it won't be the last. But the summer after freshman year, we work together doing pool construction, and on the way to work, he plays a tape of the radio show he DJs so that I can hear him dedicate a song to me, Cherry Tree by 10,000 Maniacs, about a guy so dumb he can't read, and I feel honored. There are months when I barely know what he's up to. I send him short stories, and he sends me TV scripts and tapes of his band. At some point, I realize I've been imitating his laugh since 9th grade and make myself stop. Our 20s. In Minneapolis, I meet his first serious girlfriend, and he doesn't confide sexual details to me, doesn't treat her like an obstacle to our friendship, and we all get along. That night, even though almost everything in our lives is terrible, I've been living on a waiter's salary for a decade. He hates writing ad copy. We sound so sure of ourselves and are so good at mirroring, listening to, and inspiring each other that we tape an hour of our drunken jabbering. That tape later lands in my mother's car, and she plays it until it breaks. Our 30s. Dave moves to LA to try to get a TV show on the air. We settle into a cross-country thing. While we're crashing at my aunt's house in Montauk, he points out that in a short story I recently published, a character named Dave is the obnoxious older brother. About this act of inexplicable hostility, I say almost nothing, and we never mention it again. Marriage, children, knee surgeries, work triumphs and disasters. In New York City, I see ads on taxis for a TV show he's created, but after 2 seasons, it's gone. Our friendship becomes superfluous, voluntary, sporadic. We tell each other the good things, the bad things we keep to ourselves. Eventually, we don't even share the good news. Sometimes I wonder if the friendship is merely commemorative, but then I see him, we assess the changes, throw a frisbee, talk all night, drink and smoke a few disgusting cigarettes, and he's the same, a rambling guy, an overgrown 8th grader. He visited in January and left behind a jar of peanut butter and a bottle of vermouth. That may be all I see of him for a while. Thank you. And next up, we have Deshaun Winslow.
Hello, everyone. Um, Thank you for coming out to hear us read tonight. I hope everyone is well during these weird times in our world. I was going to say country, but in our world. I'm going to read just a few pages from my first novel, In West Mills, and I'll start from the beginning. In October of 41, Azalea Center's man told her he was sick and tired of West Mills and the love affair she was having with Moonshine. Azalea, everyone called her Not, reminded him that she was a grown woman. "Stop telling me how old you is," Pratt said. "Well, I thought maybe you'd forgotten," Not retorted. She was sitting at her kitchen table pulling bobby pins from her copper red hair. She picked up her glass and finished what was left in it. She had barely set it back on the table when Pratt picked it up and threw it against the wall. Then he packed all his clothes in the old suitcase he brought when he moved into her little house a few years back. "I'm getting out of here," he affirmed. "Need some help packing?" Not shot back, and she laughed. It wasn't the first time he had packed that ragged bag. He stared at her, frowning. "Drink yourself to death if that's what you want to do. Go to hell, Pratt." "I'm leaving hell," he yelled. A few days later, Knott came home and found a folded note peeping out from under her door. First, she looked down at the signature. When she saw Pratt Shepard signed at the bottom, she took a chill glass from her icebox, poured herself a drink, and sat down to look over the message. She read most of it. It said that Pratt was at his sister's house, just across the lane. Knott wasn't surprised. Pratt's sister and her two little girls were the only family he had in West Mills. In the letter, Pratt reminded her that he still loved her, still wanted to marry her, and still wanted to start a family with her. He wrote that he would wait around for just 1 week. Then he was going back home to Tennessee. That's where Knott stopped reading. She laughed out loud, tossed the paper onto the table, and set her glass down on it. Funny, it was usually the books she used to teach her pupils that got the wet glass. Knott would be lying if she told anyone that Pratt wasn't a good man. He didn't mind hard work. He picked up after himself. He kept his body nice and clean, and he knew how to give her joy in bed. But the truth was, Pratt wasn't much fun to her otherwise. He didn't have much to talk about, and he couldn't hold his liquor to save his life. After 2 drinks, Pratt was laid out, spilling over, or both. Not like men who could match her shot for shot, keep her mind busy when they weren't drunk, and still do all the other things Pratt could do. Aside from all that, her father, she called him Pa, wouldn't like Pratt. If she were ever going to be married, it would have to be to a man her Pa loved just as much as she did. Pratt's threat to leave West Mills could not have come with better timing, because Knott's 27th birthday was a week around the corner. When the weekend came, she walked down the lane, 2 houses to the left of her house, to tell her good friend Otis Lee Loving all about her newfound freedom. And since Knott visited him most Saturday mornings and knew he would be in the kitchen, she didn't bother knocking. "You need to go on over there and fix things up with Pratt," Otis Lee said. "Otherwise, he gonna be on the next thing headed west." Otis Lee set a cup of black coffee on the table in front of Knott. His face was angry looking and peach. He didn't sit down. Just then, his wife, Pep, showed up at the table with a boiled egg and a biscuit, all inside the cracked, sand-colored bowl Knott wished they'd throw away. "Pratt can catch the next thing to hell," Knott replied. Pep pushed the bowl in front of Knott, next to the coffee. She didn't sit down either. Knott looked up at them and wondered what the day's lecture would be about. "Eat," Pep commanded. Even at 7 o'clock in the morning, her round face looked full and healthy, as though she had slept on a pillow made of air, not the rough feather-stuffed pillows Knott used. "I thought I left my mama in a hosky," Knott scoffed. Y'all got anything I can pour in this coffee? Something besides milk, I mean. Why are you so set on being lonely, Not? Otis Lee asked. Pep looked at Otis Lee as though he had gone off script, and he looked at Pep as if to say, I couldn't help myself. The way he and Pep stood there, side by side, made them look more like a boy and his mother than a husband and his wife. And why the two of them behaved so much like old people, Not never understood. They were only 5 years older than she was. For Not, it was Otis Lee's being happily married, being too short, and his old man ways that ruined the handsomeness she'd seen on him when they first met. And that handsomeness, as striking as it was, had never caused the feeling Not got deep in her stomach when she met a man she wanted to touch or be touched by in the dim light of an oil lamp. Y'all know he tried to beat me, don't you? Otis Lee and Pep both sighed at the same time. Not wondered if they had rehearsed it. You sit to my table and tell that tale, Otis Lee reproached. Then he began with his, you know good and well this, and you know good and well that. At times like these, Not had to work hard to keep her cool, because if she didn't, she might tell Otis Lee that if he spent more time worrying about his own life and his own family, he might know that the woman he knew as his mother wasn't. She was kin, but not his mother. Thank you. Please welcome to your screens, Susan Scarf Merrell.
Thanks, Deshawn. That was just so great. I need to know the rest. So I am going to read from something so new that I haven't even heard it before. So if this is the very beginning of something, and I just kind of wanted to hear it out loud. I know it's called The Common Good, and I'm going to read just a couple of pages from the very beginning. The line that separates the very rich from everyone else is invisible until you accidentally cross it, which is what Denny Carter did on the October Saturday when Rick Pagano's office left the message that Denny was invited to a meeting at Pagano's Sagaponack oceanfront estate. It was a perfect morning, brilliant sunshine, and the wind combed the first orange leaves with mild fury, meaning it was a day to take the sailboat out, not a day to kowtow to some rich dude Denny didn't know. Denny's father would have gone to Rick Pagano's mansion without a peep of resistance. He'd been an architect, and the chance to work with someone like Pagano, an opportunity he'd never turned down, even if he had more houses on his drawing boards than he could handle. But Dennis Carter Sr. had slapped away this mortal coil the previous April, a sudden heart attack on a Main Street crosswalk that stopped traffic and became the lead-in to a breathless News 12 segment about how Bay Harbor had changed in recent decades. When the ambulance arrived, people were taking videos of Carter and the stranger who knelt at his side, holding his hand and talking calmly. Nobody had given him CPR. Some kids were snickering, elbowing each other as they tried to capture selfies with the dying guy in the frame. A car's horn honked, its driver wanting to complete his circle through town so he could get to the hardware store and buy the organic laundry detergent his wife had asked him to pick up. So it goes, as a famous writer once said. Dennis Carter's death was noted as part of the end of an era. Not our Bay Harbor read the letter to the editor that was copied and pasted over and over again on social media, sparking vigorous agreement among the two communities who had firmed their toeholds in the village over the years. The born and bred locals, of course, and the summer people who had long since become year-round residents, either through retirement or an abrupt commitment to country life, usually arrived at on a sleepy August afternoon and only regretted in the dullest part of February when ice-edged gray snow slicked the streets and all the restaurants were closed for renovation. What are we giving up? Why are we changing? Asked one passionate social media user after another. How do we stop this from happening? It was hard to know how it was happening, to be honest. It seemed as if the Rick Paganos of the world had purchased pieces of Bay Harbor on the sly, grabbing up lots and buildings as if they were stock shares. The locals who sold out were tired of rude customers, backbreaking work, lack of vacation, the difficulty finding staff, and the money offered was staggering. 18 million for a building that had last traded for 400,000 2 decades before, 9 million for a small storefront with 2 apartments upstairs. The hardware store, the bank, the five and dime, the single Chinese restaurant, the laundromat had all been sold to people who didn't care about price or rental streams or even the way basements up and down the single block of Main Street flooded when the rain was torrential. For now, no one had tried to do anything strange, to up rents drastically or tear down a historic structure, but everyone was on edge, waiting for the shoe to drop to finally figure out what they were after, what they wanted. I think I'm going to stop there. Thank you, guys. Wait, I have to find my... So next up is Roger Rosenblatt.
I'm going to read from a new book called Cataract Blues on Nothing at All. And it has to do with cataract surgery I have had and the appreciation of the color blue, but mainly with invisible and inaudible things in the world and the power of invisible and audible things. And I include my daughter who died some years ago, and she remains invisible and inaudible and present, as inaudible and invisible things tend to do. I run the keys as I tend to write, the way you do on piano and the way jazz moves. Cataract Blues. The human eye has more rods, that is, cells used for perception of light, located at the outer edges of the retina, which allows us to see certain things more clearly out of the corners of our eyes. Colors, on the other hand, are perceived by cones at the center of the eye. In my odd way of seeing things, this means that my recent enthrallment with the color blue is the direct product of looking straight ahead, whereas the music of the blues played at the far sides of my mind. One is front and center, the other a ghost in the wings. When I see blue and feel blue, I am using my whole eye. Charles Cole, my cataract surgeon, travels the world using his skills in the neediest places. In Africa, he tells me, the cataracts are so thick they form a black shield over the eyes. Villagers who suffer cataracts are legally blind and need to be led around by sighted people who hold one end of a stick as a blind person holds the other. In the villages where Dr. Cole has worked his magic, there are piles of discarded sticks. These piles of sticks become accidental monuments that may remind villagers of the times that so many of them were helpless and helpful to one another. Such transactions speak for the beautiful gestures people are occasionally capable of. The blind man at the short end of the stick had to imagine everything around him, though the help he was given was real. He even imagined the appearance of his helper. By necessity, he saw inward, where the vistas are illimitable. He was helpless, but he saw. Once cured and seeing, what did he think every day that he passed the pile of sticks? Relief and gratitude only, marvel at Western science, or a pang of longing? Attempting to account for the fact that the ancient Irish soldiers lost every battle they got into, the poet Seamus O'Sheill posited that it was a secret music the soldiers heard, a sad, sweet plea for pity and for peace, because they were sensitive to a spiritual sound. I doubt that such receptivity comes naturally. One must cultivate an inner stillness capable of picking up the unplayed notes, the nothing that is there, as Wallace Stevens said of snow. First there is nothing, then the nothing becomes everything. The Irish warriors surrendered not to the enemy, but to the mystery. Something will come to you, Richard Wilbur's assurance in Waking to Sleep. Like a queen who expects her chair to be there when she wishes to sit, like a general scouting the enemy who expects a pair of binoculars to be placed in his hands when he needs them. Something essential will come to you without being summoned. I tell that to my writing students when they bemoan dry spells. They don't believe it, and then they do. There are sticks out there waiting to be held by two. There is a secret music out there waiting to sweep through you like a jazz riff. Trust me, trust it. Something will come to you. I got a right to sing the blues. I have to write to swing the blues. I have the sight to see the blues. Blue, the color blue. Once Dr. Cole removed my cataracts, there remained what he called a foreign object in my right eye. Soon it was gone. The color blue came busting into my life like an Atlantic City stripper, brassy, noisy, hey, big spender. Call me Mr. Blue. Oh, say, can you see nothing in traditional Chinese architecture? Dugong is a structural element of interlocking wooden brackets. The pieces are fitted together by joinery alone without nails, glues, or fasteners. In the early dynasties, vast places and religious buildings were built this way. To look at them, one would never know that dugong was supporting the structure because the arrangement of the wooden pieces depends on the absence of visible, tangible, adhesive elements. In other words, the dugong represents the there that is not there. What will you not acknowledge as there might not be there, and yet we always know something is there. For the essence of invisibility is something present that cannot or will not be seen, not something not there. Absence requires presence. Remember the tune, All or Nothing at All? All or Nothing at All offers a choice of two somethings. Sing it. She had her own songs. Many children do. Hers was fortified by her insistence that her lyrics were real words, no matter how unusual they sounded. In the car, she would sing, a rock and roll boat is a way boat. When we asked her what a wave boat was, she said it was a wave boat. When we asked her what a wave boat was, she turned away annoyed and looked out the window. Her pediatrician, John Roby, was referred to as Rock and Roll Roby. When warm weather arrived, she sang, a summer day is a comer day. We knew better than to press her on the meaning of a comer day, so a summer day was a comer day. Sometimes she exercised poetic license. Passing fields of a few grazing cows, then a few more, she squealed and shouted with excitement, cows, billions of them. Sometimes it flares, sometimes it smolders, as in a kiln, as in a mood indigo, blue indigo. Blue coals in orange fires, it always starts with a mote in the eye, one of those foreign objects. This one is domestic. There is an ache, then it passes. The recollection of a hat, the first pair of shoes, dank joists in a silo, a matinee, a foot race, horses, a phrase or two or 10. A summer day is a comer day. Then it passes. The pupil dilates. On the eye chart, what is the smallest letter you can read? A. And a tear-wet face articulated by a moon ray on a snow field in Vermont. Too cold, Daddy. Little girl blue. Head back, look up, look down, wide open. Then that's gone too, along with a figment of a security blanket, a liquid laugh, red boots, cartwheels in Logan Airport, and cows, billions of them. Blink once. This may sting a little. Thank you. And now, the remarkable Susan Minot.
Thank you so much, Roger. I'm getting a death theme going here, which I'm going to continue rather than stop. I think that, as Molly said, saying things about death and about loss is one of our ways of sort of grappling with it all. And I'm going to read actually two poems, and they're actually, alas, not by Emily Dickinson or Edward Thomas, who I was going to go run and get after Molly read Dylan Thomas, but they're by me. So one of them is it's told from the point of view of a dog that is the dog in a large family. And slowly but surely, all the children in this family leave the family house. And this is the dog's lament. It's family dog, it's a sonnet. You left, not I. One by one, there were less of you, less bicycles tipping off stands, less leftovers I'd get of stew, less and less shouts, and then fewer hands to pull back my ears or smooth my head or strangle my throat till my tongue went dry. Some of you changed tastes, slept with cats instead. Each apart, you told me you loved me, a lie. You each went, snapping your suitcase shut. I loped after each car, barking at the end of our drive. I could only stray so far. What I was attached to in you would not stretch or bend. When the last who sucked his bottle, lying on my fleecy side, left, I ambled off to where dogs bereft go, down by the railroad tracks, and died. And this is another poem. Susie was saying she's reading something that's so new, and this is something so old, but it's also something that I've never read out loud. It's in my collection of poems. No one's ever said anything to me about it. It was never published anywhere before. And so I just thought I'd see what it sounded like, digging up this old thing that no one's ever heard. And it's called Talking of the Dead. We sat in a tall living room and talked about the dead. One woman there knew my friend and spoke of his service that November day in another high living room with views of Central Park and yellow frigid trees. I was there, she said. Did you attend? There were eulogies to recall. Do you do that? A man asked. Speak at them all? And he told me of how the dead do not go, for him they stay inside. Someone told the story of the poet who died on the mountain in Tibet and how they heard a great booming on the set when his plane smashed into the hills. This reminds another of another crash, then of a guy who lost his lung, then of the man whose brain burst, so he died before his son was born. There's one who sped into a wall, and one who choked on gas, and a woman with a polished cane who didn't waste to last it out. One's heart is crowded through with all of them. One might break or break away and stand and sway above a vast pit of pity, fed up, full of bitterness, ready to chuck it all and hurl oneself in. The people one loses, the man says again, as if to make it true, they stay within. It is another day in another place. Again, I think of you. And you, and you, and you, and you. I'm glad I went before Robert Lopez, who is following me. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. It occurs to me that we've heard something old and something new and borrowed, and we heard blue, and we haven't heard subway stuff. So I'm going to read 2 short bits set on subways from a new book coming out in 2 weeks called A Better Class of People. This one's called The Dahlberg Repercussions. The woman on the subway looked like my mother, so I sat down next to her and said, "You look like my mother." I said, "Does it seem like that to you? That you are someone who looks like my mother and that I look like someone who could be your son? If circumstances were different, that is, if you were old enough to be my mother or I were young enough to be your son." I said, "Don't misunderstand me." I said, "You look like how my mother used to look, not how she looks now. Although my mother still looks good, and I didn't mean to imply otherwise." I said, "My mother is a good-looking woman, and that bodes well for all of us. I'm talking about genes now more than anything else. The truth is, I haven't seen my mother in 20 years because she won't have anything more to do with me. So when I said my mother looks good now, it's only speculation. I remember her own mother, my grandmother, that is, and she kept her looks well into her 70s. This is when the woman who looked like my mother said, 'Excuse me, sir,' and I admonished her for being so formal. I said, 'How dare you, with someone that could be your son if circumstances were different.' I could tell she was from a better class of people by the way she spoke and what she wore, and thus could never be my mother. But I kept on anyway. This is when the woman who looked like my mother got up from the bench and walked over to the doors. She stood staring straight into her own reflection and waiting for the next stop. She looked like a flagpole in an open field to me. It looked like she couldn't be toppled, like she was entirely unmovable, and that she would never acknowledge that she was someone who looked like my mother, or that I was someone who could be her son." Okay, and then this other bit is called What Is or Isn't Collapsing. 4 deaf kids are talking shit about me on the other side of the car. I can tell it's me they're talking about because every so often they look my way and start in with the hands and fingers. I'm wearing headphones, so they probably think I'm showing off. There are maybe 10 people with headphones in. I don't know why they have singled me out. I tried smiling at the girl, but I think she took it the wrong way. Something in her face told me I should fuck off because she doesn't take kindly to older men who smile at her on the subway with only one thing on their mind. I'm not sure why she thinks this about me because it's not the truth. I almost want to tell them about my tinnitus, that I have it in both ears now, and it's awful. I could tell them that I'm losing my hearing too, particularly in my left ear, and I'm too old to learn sign language. I can never go on a subway and talk to anyone after I'm deaf, so these kids don't know how lucky they are. They're all spread out in the car, occupying different benches, and still they can talk to each other and not bother anyone. This is probably the greatest gift, but instead they go around in pity for themselves. I don't talk to anyone on the subway if I can help it, and I almost never take the subway with someone I know. And the girl I smiled at, it had nothing to do with what's spilling out of the top of her blouse. So it's something like a Mexican standoff, except that would have to involve another person, so it's not exactly like that either. Maybe if there was a blind person in the subway car, one with a seeing eye dog and a cane, then we could have a real Mexican standoff. And if everyone had their guns on them, we could all shoot each other in the face. That would be glorious. You do see people shooting each other in the face on the subway, so it's not impossible, but I should stop thinking about it because thinking gets you nowhere. Instead, I could tell them I'm going deaf on account of the tinnitus and blind because of keratoconus, which I've had for 30 years now. I could try telling them this. I could try schooling them, but what then? These kids don't want to hear from the likes of me, and maybe they're right. The song I'm listening to with my headphones has some poor bastard asking to borrow lungs because his are collapsing. He says that Jesus was an only son and love is only concept, but it goes all to hell when strangers come in foreign tongues and dirty up the doorstep. This proves that even Jesus didn't like Europeans and South Americans. You can't blame Jesus because it was the Europeans that killed him and the South Americans stood by and did nothing to stop it. So when I look at these kids, I see the Romans and Incas in league with each other. And you know, it doesn't even occur to them that I might be Jesus on the cross in this scenario. Okay, so now I'm going to thank you for listening. Thank all my colleagues for this wonderful evening. And throw it back to Paul, who's going to do more thanks, and a good night.
Yep, there's not enough time left in the night to thank you all adequately. Every time I hear you all, I'm humbled and glad all over again that I get to be a writer. I figured I'd leave us all with a line or two from Walt Whitman. He says, "This is what you shall do. Love the earth and sun and the animals. Despise riches. Give alms to everyone that asks. Stand up for the stupid and the crazy. Devote your income and labor to others. Hate tyrants. Argue not concerning God. Have patience and indulgence towards the people. Take off your hat to nothing known or unknown, or to any man or number of men. Go freely with powerful, uneducated persons, and with the young, and with the mothers of families. Read these leaves in the open air every season of every year of your life. Re-examine all you have been told at school or church or in any book. Dismiss whatever insults your own soul, and your very flesh shall be a great poem and have the richest fluency, not only in its words, but in the silent lines of its lips and face, and between the lashes of your eyes, and in every motion and joint of your body." We hope you are all safe and healthy, and thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon. Good night, everyone.